All right, a large portion of this channel is me talking about technology, why you should get involved in technology, almost like I'm selling you on a career in technology, even though you don't see any affiliate links. Hey, if you know of any affiliate links, send them my way. I'm always looking to make a little extra money. No, I always talk about like I'm selling you on this technology career, right? Like, oh, you know, you can make a lot of money, you get a certain style of life, but I'm gonna give you the ugly side of working in technology, working as an engineer, developer, DBA, whatever it is, the side of it that the schools and the courses and things like that don't show you. Okay, so I've been in the technology industry for over 10 years now, in some degree or another, right? I started in tech support, worked my way up to senior engineer. And everybody says, who's not in the industry, oh man, I sure would love to do what you do. What do you even do? It's like you're at home, you know, you don't seem to be bothered that often, right? You don't seem to be, you know, hustling and bustling here and there. Like, it looks like a really good job. And I also, when I first got my very first systems administration job, I would come in, this is still back in the office days, I would come in and all the other sysadmins would just be so salty. They were just so grumpy, and they were just down on the corporation and down on team members and down on the project managers and the service delivery guys. And I didn't understand. You know, I had been in the Army, and literally the Sunday before I started, so I started on Monday, and that Sunday I had been working a retail job because I had left my help desk job and I was waiting to start this sysadmin job. Well, the sysadmin job was in a kind of a sub-government entity type thing, so the clearance took a lot longer, and I needed money in between. So I was literally working a terrible retail job in a major department store, you know, stacking their like Christmas trees and dishes and blankets and toasters. You know, that's what I was doing. So it was like, it wasn't a manual labor job, but you were active, right? And you still had to deal with the customers, you still had to deal with management, and it was all that. You had to sell credit cards, right? So I come into this as admin job, and I'm like, what is going on? You guys should be ecstatic to be here. This is the best job, the best situation ever. Well, over time, you start to see it, right? You start to get worn down. So even though you're in technology, even though you're making a decent amount of money, even though your lifestyle is nice, like even back in the office days, you know, you're 9 to 5 in it, you come in late, you leave early, you take an hour or 2 hour lunch, right? Very laid back. You know, there's not a lot of yelling going on. There's not a lot of commotion. You're just doing your tickets and going home for the day. And everyone thinks, oh, but tech management's so cool. Okay, here's what you got to understand. First and foremost about the downsides, the darkness of technology, is you're still dealing with all the same corporate nonsense you're going to be dealing with anyway. So you still have your annual HR training that is completely useless. Oh, don't click on the suspicious email. Got it. You're gonna make our certified security engineers take your phishing course? You're kidding me, right? Yeah. You're still dealing with all the HR, all the nonsense, all the terms. That's another thing. The terms, the tech terms. There's a point in your career where you hear the word prod and you're just like, oh, you know, all the little terms, acronyms, all that stuff. Just right now, I'm over it. I'm past it. But there was a time in my career where all the lingo just ground me down like buzzing in my ear, right? So burnout. That's all burnout, right? Burnout is real. Burnout is so real in this industry. Yeah, you're not using your hands and your arms and your strength, but you're using your mind, and you burn out. You know, the first real tech job I had nightmares of code. And I'm sure that's a common experience with junior, you know, developers and junior engineers. So you're dealing with burnout, you're dealing with nonsense, you're dealing with, there was a point in my time, like not that long ago, where I would be driving by guys mowing yards, and I'd be like, those guys are so lucky. And I remember when I was in the Army, and I would be in this hot, dirty, nasty situation, and I would see cars drive by, and I'm like, oh, how nice would it be to be in that air conditioning, or I would see guys who had these tech jobs that I was envious of. I'm like, oh, that's so great. But when you're in tech for like 8 years, you're like, I sure wouldn't mind doing some manual labor. So the burnout's real. It's just terrible. And like I said, you got the same corporate crap everyone else gets. So you're going to have bad managers. You're going to have really good managers, don't get me wrong. But the good managers are few and far between. And when you get a good manager, it's hard to keep them. So you're going to deal with weirdos, right? You're going to deal with managers who are non-technical. So I worked for a company, and this non-technical manager came in, and he wanted ticket numbers. So in an engineer, so it was a site reliability engineering role, this guy wanted ticket count. He wanted you to close a certain amount of tickets per week because he wanted numbers to show his managers, right? And it's like, hey, that's not really how site reliability engineering works unless you want guys manufacturing things. So it's like take a task and cut it into 1,000 pieces and be like, hey, I emailed the PM, task closed. You know, something like that. Also, you're going to have vindictive people that you're going to be around. I had one manager. It's kind of weird when you get like a senior or a principal engineer who gets tossed into a management role. You would think, oh, that's great, that's going to be really good. They're the worst. They're absolutely the worst. I've had 2 experiences where I've had principal engineers filling in a management style or a mentor supervisor style role. The first was you don't hear from this guy for an entire year, right? There's no guidance, there's no collaboration. He just disappears. And then one day he wakes up and decides he's a manager now. And he's going to start really tracking everybody's work. And it's like, we didn't hear from you for an entire year. And now you want to be manager? Like, what happened? What are we not seeing here, right? I had another principal engineer I worked for. And he had this AWS environment all to himself forever. It was a little Ansible AWS environment set up. He was the only person that knew anything about it or could really do anything with it. And I was brought in to help this guy, to work under him so that he wouldn't be the single point of failure for this very critical piece of like infrastructure. Well, the guy was a complete jerk. And he was in my interview, and in the interview, he kept his camera off the entire time, which is kind of a red flag. Now, I am a camera off kind of guy, but not in certain types of settings or certain types of meetings, and especially not in interviews. Well, apparently this guy was such a bad guy. If people reached out to him with anything sort of related to Windows, right, because he was a Linux guy, he wouldn't even respond to them. He wouldn't give them the time of day. The guy wouldn't help you. One time I asked for help and he RTFM'd me, which means read the manual, essentially, on Ansible. And I'm like, you were in my interview. Y'all hired me for my Ansible skills. And then a week or 2 goes by and he finally, I guess I shouldn't have RTFM'd you. You really did need my help. Yeah, it's a unique situation that I needed a unique perspective on. So the guy was a complete jerk to the point where like I had to just leave that company really at the end of the day. If it's like, this is who I'm stuck with and this guy is bad mouthing everybody, no, I'm out. And so you're going to run into that. And if you're in technology, you're inevitably going to run into, how do I say this politely? Dorks, you're going to have very competitive situations that you're going to be in. You're going to run into highly academic know-it-alls. You're going to run into very socially awkward people. It's just, you got to find a good place and a good team. And if you can't, it's not going to be a good experience. I had touched on project managers and service delivery. So at my very first job, there was an entire team called service delivery, and their entire job was to bug people. They didn't have jobs. They didn't do anything. They just bothered people and then gave status reports. And at least the project managers do project manager stuff. But you got to think about it. If you're touching as an infrastructure engineer, you could be touching multiple projects. So every project manager for each project is bothering you. And then an entire service delivery team is on your back constantly. So those things start to grind on you. The mandatory fun days start to grind on you. The watch what you say because of HR starts to grind on you. Meetings after meetings after meeting. It's just so many meetings in this industry. And then there's this one horrible thing that we do called stand-up. Oh, stand-up. Let me tell you about stand-up. Stand-up is supposed to be a little 15-minute meeting where the whole team says what they worked on and what they're going to work on and do we have any blockers. That is not how stand-ups go in the real world. In the real world, you're going to get people who want to prove their worth, and they're going to give you a 45-minute speech on all the great things they're doing. You're going to have managers who are complete dirtbags, and your stand-up is going to be a justify your job. Okay? Yeah, that's not what it's supposed to be. I've had managers that want to sit, it's a remote role, but they want to sit on a team meeting for 2, 3, 4 hours to build the team. So it really it's just the pick. And it's like when you learn a technology and you come into a company and you're proficient at that technology, well, you got to understand the company is going to put roadblocks, so many roadblocks. You know the old saying, the more secure something is, the less user-friendly it is, right, so to speak. So you can have something that's super secure and impenetrable, but you can't use it, right? Well, a lot of the what you don't realize about corporate nonsense, even as a developer, even when you get past the got to have 2 reviewers on a GitHub push, got to do this, got all the rules and all the rules that go around the pipelines and all the little cult and insider things you need to know about the pipelines and all that stuff, you still got to deal with security. You still have to deal with what they call cabs, which is basically where a bunch of people get together and make sure that a change advisory board is not going to cause any damage. And it all makes sense on paper, but in practice, it's completely different. You're like, well, having people looking out for the safety of the company in a cab meeting is great. That's a really good idea. Not in practice. You got to get approvals, and people don't want to look at their email, and you got to fill out mountains of paperwork. And like I had touched on with tribal knowledge, that's one of the things. You're going to get people who are guarding knowledge so that they're not replaceable, kind of like that principal engineer. They don't. I worked in a situation where I was putting out instruction videos because we had taken on a night team, and the senior engineer on that project says, hey, you need to stop making videos. I don't want them to know what we know. There's just the 2 of us that knew enough about this thing to support it and roll out new deployments and things like that. It was Elasticsearch. And he's like, yeah, stop making videos, stop making documentation. These people, I don't want them knowing what we know. He was gatekeeping. And then he ended up leaving the company anyway for higher pay at a different company. You're going to run into gatekeepers. You're going to run into knowledge guardians. You're going to run into this tribal knowledge. And like I said, there's competitive points to it. So you're going to have, when you ask a legitimate question, you're going to have people go, oh, you don't know? It's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not from here, It's just there's a lot that people don't see. And I realize all of this is pretty much a nothing. But when you see the tech people that are salty, right, and the answering, it goes beyond like answering stupid questions and things like that. It's because there's a lot of nonsense that they are putting up with. Now, is it 1,000 times better than a customer service role? Absolutely, 100%. But it's still there, and it's kind of like, the frog in the boiling pot. Like you just kind of get used to your thing, and the little grinds and things like that. They get to you because you don't have the outside perspective, right? So to someone stuck in like a customer service tech support role, they might say, well, I'd rather deal with tight corporate guidelines and security issues and bad management than what I'm doing. But then like an engineer who's been doing it for 20 years, instantly loses their mind over the littlest thing because it's been thousands and thousands of little things over the course of decades. I don't know how to explain it, but that's my best ability to, or attempt to explain it. So yeah, there's pitfalls in the tech industry, man. There's downsides. You know, you're still tied to your computer. You're still tied to a clock. You're still tied to a schedule. You're going to have meetings. Some of those meetings are on-camera meetings, right? You're still tied down in a lot of ways. Another and the final thing I wanted to touch on before we close out this video is layoffs. Before I got into the tech industry, I had met these guys through a friend of my girlfriend's who were video game developers, and they were making about 70 grand a year, which back in those days, I thought, oh, that's really cool, because like my market value, I was doing my business stuff back in those days, but if I looked at my market value, it wasn't even half that. It was maybe half that, you know. So I was like, oh, you know, that's really cool. But then they explained to me how in the video game industry, you just get laid off constantly. It's like when they finish a project, they lay off 95% of their workforce and only keep a few people on to kind of maintain it. I was like, well, I don't want that lifestyle. That sucks. I'll go, what's a stable thing to do? And so I went into infrastructure, and then the culture shifted. So now it's like, look, if you're at a company for 2 years, you've been there a long time. And you know, layoffs are constant. You know, you have the sword of Damocles hanging over your head all the time. And I know that that's corporate America today. I had a friend leave Amazon. You know, everyone, oh, I want to work at Amazon. What a great thing. And he had an amazing title and he was making okay money. He left Amazon, threw away his entire career, threw away his entire education, and started over. He became a carpenter at like 35. I mean, he went to school to become a carpenter at 35 because the corporate world sucked, and he got laid off, and that was the final straw. So you're going to constantly, no matter how much, oh, I make $250,000 a year and I get these benefits and I've got this kind of office or this kind of lifestyle, that can all be ripped away from you in no time. No time. My friend got a job, I'm not kidding you, making $225,000 a year. He was doing a pipeline engineering for a company, a little startup company, and after 3 months, they laid him off. They just decided they didn't want to do that project anymore. There's no job security anymore. And there's no pensions either. You're not working for a pension. You're not, you know, there's no exit plan. And it's like when you do build up wealth, when there's no wealth in this industry. When you do build up a nest egg, a little savings of some kind, then you get laid off and you blow through it. Because it used to be you had to save 3 months of your not salary, but your survivable money, right? Because it usually took about 3 months to get a new job in my industry. Now, 6 months. You got guys going on several years. You got guys going and getting grocery store jobs to survive. So there's no job security, and there's no real future, and there's not really any advancement. You have to change companies to get promoted. I have only been promoted a few times internally. My big jumps, $20,000, $30,000 jumps, were to new companies. So that's just a little bit of insight into the downside of working in tech that you may not have heard about. And maybe that discourages you, maybe it doesn't, but it's I'm just trying to be honest here. So hope someone gains something from that.